started? Okay. Morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Wyatt. I'm Director of the Office of Workplace Diversity here at the FCC. It's my great pleasure to welcome each of you to this morning's National Disability Employment Awareness Month program. For those of you who are visiting the FCC for the first time, welcome. We're really pleased that you're able to join us today. I understand that we have today's program in accessible formats on the rear table, so if anyone needs an accessible format, Braille or large print, you'll find it on the table in the back. I especially want to thank our panelists who are here with us today to share their insights and perspectives on disability and employment. And of course, it's them, not me, that you're here to listen to, so without further delay, I'd like to welcome to the podium FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler, who will provide some opening remarks for us.
Thank you, Thomas, and I will take your hint that it's the panelists, not the people standing up here, that everybody came to hear today. But I would like to welcome everybody and to make a couple of observations. First of all, it was about a year ago that I stood in this room right down here and talked about how this agency was the federal optimism and opportunity agency because of the kinds of things that we dealt with. I feel that now more than ever, and today we get to focus on a couple of keys to that optimism and opportunity: empowerment and employment. You know, we have a rare opportunity as this agency to be astride a technological revolution that can be harnessed to attack the challenges of individuals with disabilities. This agency has a responsibility to push and prod to realize those opportunities. And I can also say, seeing Claude Stout sitting over here in the audience, that there are people who are making sure, like Claude, that this agency pushes and prods. For instance, on the topic of closed captioning, those who hear with their eyes shouldn't be forced to put up with a situation that those who hear with their ears would never tolerate. And so, working with Claude and others, we updated, after a 10-year wait, our closed captioning rules. Similarly, new technologies, there's no greater example than how new technologies can be harnessed than text to 911, which we have now made a mandatory activity. I remember a young lady who was hearing impaired who came in to see me when we were considering this item, and she talked about when she was babysitting her younger sister who had some kind of a seizure. But she was incapable of calling 911 to get help for her sister, for whom she was responsible. And so, fast thinking, she texted her mother. And fortunately, her mother saw the text quickly, and her mother called 911. Now, however, as a result of the actions taken by this agency, everyone will be able to text 911 and to have alternative pathways for essential messages. You know, Stevie Wonder was in here a couple weeks ago, and he came to see me. That was kind of cool. And he challenged us in behalf of those who see with their ears. And fortunately, Terry Pachenko, who is visually impaired and has joined us to work on alternative formatting issues, was able to join in that meeting, and Terry is now leading our efforts to explore what can be done to make sure that the video that is available is also accessible to all. How we run our activities here is also changing. As I said, Terry Pachenko is now with us. Her job is to make commission materials accessible to the visually impaired. We have new ways of using the video IP, the video internet, for those who speak ASL so that they can communicate with the FCC. And while those may be some things that's changed, one thing that hasn't changed is the amazing Karen Peltz-Strauss, who continues to push us forward. Karen, as you know, literally wrote the book on access for hearing impaired individuals. And we will continue these efforts. Let me just make one other announcement in that regard. We are going to form a disability advisory committee here at the FCC as a formal federal advisory committee. Now, as many of you may know, before I was privileged to take this job, I was the chairman of the FCC's Technological Advisory Committee, where we got together all the best technology brains to advise the Commission on various challenges. Why shouldn't we get together the very best brains on disability issues to make sure that in all the issues that we deal with at the Commission, that we are making sure that issues that relate to how we use this technology to address the challenges of Americans with disabilities is something that is forefront, that people who are creative are thinking about and advising us. So before the year is out, we will have announced the details, the personnel, the creation. You know, I found that when I was chairing the TAC, a federal advisory committee is a serious thing. It literally goes all the way back to George Washington's time. And we're going to take that kind of structure and put it to work here. Let me address one other thing that we're also dealing with here, because it's not just empowerment that is key, it's also employment. Everyone should have the opportunity to experience the dignity of work. And this commission has a long record of inclusiveness of individuals with physical disabilities as a part of our family. Approximately 10% of the workforce here at the FCC is individuals with various physical disabilities. But we're also expanding that effort to hire individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And in that regard, I want to specifically call out and welcome Cameron Kahn, Alex Mitrovich, who you're going to hear from later this morning, Keith Coburn, David Findlin, and Shanika Goldsberry, who have all recently joined the FCC family, along with a new intern that we have in the chairman's office from the LIFE program at George Mason University, Danielle Daig. The bureau chiefs are looking for inclusion opportunities inside their responsibilities. And in that regard, I want to just share with you, and this will probably embarrass Keith, but I want to share with you an email I got from Bill Lake, who is many of you know, is the chief of our media bureau, who says that Peter Doyle of the audio division reports that in his 19 years in the media bureau's audio division, no other new employee has had as good a first month as Keith Coburn. I mean, yeah, let's hear it for Keith. I went down to visit Keith the other day, and he says, everything begins and ends with me. Because all the applications come in and the licenses go out, and he does both ends of the process. And the way in which Peter and the others in the Media Bureau have welcomed Keith is terrific. As I said this morning, later on you'll hear from Alec. But it's important that we also recognize that the members of our FCC family here, who have been involved and supportive and making this work, deserve recognition too. Of course, there's Peter in the Media Bureau, Regina Davis in OMD, Tim Gray. Where are you, Tim? Where'd you go? I saw you. There you are, over there. Tim Gray, who has been terrific in some of the things he's been doing to help Alex move along. Lisa Scanlon and Annette Smith in the Media Bureau. Melissa Askew and Michael Karowitz in CGB, who have been working with both Alex and David. Tony McGowan, who has been working with Cameron, Jeff Cousins, Michael Shupin, Wanda Sims in OMD, who have been consequential in helping to screen various candidates and help us interview. And of course, Tonya Johnson in HR, and Thomas, the leadership role that you have shown, sir. Thank you very much. And I think that Thomas and everybody else would say that the real shout out needs to go to Mindy Ginsburg, who is, there she is. She's hiding. She had to know this was coming, and so she's scrunched down here. Because our guide in all of this activity has been Mindy. And all I can say to you is watch Mindy. Because she's going to be in demand throughout the federal government. Because she is building here at the FCC the model. She's overcoming challenges in building that model. And she's making the FCC the leading light in the area of employment for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we're really grateful and proud of the work Mindy's doing. So let me take Thomas's admonition and get out of the way and let people, this great panel and others, talk. But one last thought. All over America, individuals with disabilities are leading their lives and are loved by their families. We have the opportunity at this agency to put to work the unique position that we have astride technological change and to prove how we are the optimism and opportunity agency of the federal government. Our policy decisions to increase access are only going to continue. And our personnel decisions to enhance access are going to follow the same upward path. And as I am proud of often saying to our hearing impaired friends, this is only the beginning. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is always hard to follow the chairman. It's no longer a matter of people with disabilities not being left behind here. This is front and center. It's unparalleled, and it's extraordinary, and I'm so privileged and excited to be a part of it. It's truly a new era. I first want to start by thanking everyone in the Disability Rights Office and in CAOD who have contributed to these efforts. It's not any one person, as you know, that makes these changes. It truly is a village, starting with all of the people that I'm looking at right now in the Disability Rights Office, who are absolutely extraordinary, and expanding to all the bureaus in the agency who have made such an enormous difference over the last several years in implementing the new laws that we have to require communications access. So I'm also going to try not to be long. You know me, so it's very hard for me not to be, but I'm going to try. But the first question I have is, we're not the Department of Labor, so why are we hosting an event on employment? All you have to do is look at the tasks that you perform every day to figure out that communications access is essential to employment. And some of the ways are obvious. Look at a student looking to put him or herself through school, needing access to a web browser on a computer to peruse job directories. A recent graduate needs access to email to respond to a job announcement. An aspiring government worker needs access to the phone to set up an interview. And all of these individuals may need access to mobile phones if they're going to be traveling in their jobs to keep up with their colleagues. But some of the ways are not so obvious. Maybe a school needs to contact a parent to let them know that the bus is late so that the parent can call the job, their employer, and let them know that they're going to be late, and then they're not penalized. Or maybe a working parent needs to contact a child's doctor to find out if the child is too sick to go to school so the parent can call the employer again and not be penalized. Even access to video programming, something else that we oversee here, can play a role in workforce success. When you're informed about last night's current events and the outcome of the World Series, that may win you some points when you're interviewing with a potential employer. I guess it depends on who you wanted to win. I remember a client many, many years ago in the 1980s who had to take an employment personality test. It was for some construction-type job. We really couldn't figure out why they were giving him this test, but apparently these tests are common. And he did really badly on it. And one of the areas that he did badly on, and Elaine, you may remember this, is that he didn't know the television shows that were popular. I remember he got one wrong about Dynasty. Why? Because it didn't have captions. So the point is that even where you least expect it, not having access to communications and video programming could have a direct or an indirect effect on your ability to find employment. So what has Congress done about it? Of course, you know, over the years it's passed a number of laws, and the most recent one is the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, otherwise known as the CVAA, that requires access to advanced communication services and video programming. As you know, it also requires access to video description, a few other things that had been left out of formal laws. We recently released our second biennial report on the CVAA to Congress, and we were so proud to report on the Commission's implementation of virtually every section that had a deadline, and to report that the industries, the communications and video programming industries, have been making fantastic strides in achieving access, really, again, unprecedented as never before. Tremendous strides. We know that more needs to be done. The report indicates this, but people have choices now. It used to be that you have like one phone that was accessible, or it might be a specialized device. Now people actually have choices, and this has huge implications for employment, especially where an employer might use a particular kind of device. Needing access to all kinds of devices is important. I want to just highlight now one particular area of the CVAA about which we are so proud, and that's the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. This program has literally and dramatically changed people's lives, and I want to read to you just one particular example and then throw out a couple of other headlines that we've gotten. A letter written from a woman who wrote that the computer received by her adult deafblind son has allowed him in the space of a year, and this is a program, let me just back up, it's a program that gives $10 million, allocates $10 million a year for the distribution of communications equipment to people who are deafblind who have low incomes. She wrote, "This has allowed him in the space of a year to learn new software, how to Skype, and how to conduct research on, quote, anything and everything that he's interested in finding more information about." She says the computer has opened up a new world for her son, who's now going back to community college to finish an associate's degree or to get a certificate in technology to work with other people who are deafblind. The Perkins Center, which is one of our partners in this effort on this program called I Can Connect, regularly sends us information about how this program is helping people, and we have headlines such as "New equipment is key to success for University of Utah student. Georgia poet communicates like never before thanks to I Can Connect. Illinois accountant with combined hearing and vision loss says smartphone changed her life. Communications technology is helping Kansans with hearing and vision loss live independently. New technology brings Wisconsin woman back into the lives of her 25-plus grandchildren." The list goes on and on. Hawaiian musician sings the praises of I Can Connect. It is incredibly heartwarming to read these stories and to know that this commission has made such an extraordinary impact and direct impact on the lives of people who are trying to become independent and productive. Besides the CVAA, you know that we implement a lot of other laws. We have Section 255, which requires access to telecommunications services. We have requirements for telecommunications relay services. We have requirements for hearing and compatibility, and, of course, requirements for closed captioning. So all of these have had an enormous impact and continue to have an enormous impact on making sure that people can be part of the communications mainstream and participate in employment and other life activities. Today's first panel will be discussing the impact of these various FCC efforts to improve communications access, as well as the impact that technological advancements can have on the employment of people with disabilities, both now and in the future. The second panel will focus more on the FCC efforts and efforts elsewhere in the federal government to increase the participation of people with disabilities in the workforce and to remove barriers to equal employment opportunities. So without further ado, I present you the first panel, which will be moderated by the Chief of the Disability Rights Office, Greg Hlibok, who many of you know spearheaded efforts decades ago to get the first deaf president of Gallaudet University, and that movement helped lead to the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the forerunner of many of these laws. Obviously, we're privileged to have Greg, and so proud that he's the first chief of the disability office that has a disability. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. It's really exciting to see everyone here this morning and for me to be here to talk about the efforts that have gone on with regards to advancement and employment for people with disabilities. We are going to start out here with a couple remarks. Specifically, we'll talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, one of the key driving forces behind that piece of legislation was improving employment opportunities for people with disabilities. The language that is used over and over again leading up to that effort in the late 80s was that people with disabilities would become contributing members of society. And in order to contribute effectively, employment had to be an option for them rather than simply staying home, being part of the workforce, contributing their skills and abilities just like anyone else was one of the driving forces behind that. And we see that in Title I of the ADA, which is employment. Since nearly 25 years, which will be this next summer, the 25-year anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, as reported by Senator Harkin's HELP committee, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Subcommittee. There was a report published in September that pointed out that one persistent, stubborn problem, one challenge that we have had for access with people with disabilities has been employment. We have seen some marginal improvement, but not the level of improvement that we would like to see, whereas in other areas, like accessibility to technology, access to video programming, among other things, there have been a lot of advancements, but employment tends to be a challenge that we are lagging behind, and that is why we have this session here this morning, to emphasize the importance of those employment opportunities. We want to emphasize that we appreciate the chairman's support, and establishing programs like we have done here at the FCC to employ people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities is important. We have also established our ASL customer support line, as the chairman mentioned, that provides direct video access to consumers. Anyone using a video phone, using American Sign Language, deaf or hard of hearing, can make a direct connection to someone at the Federal Communications Commission now, rather than being provided with that access by way of an interpreter, by relay services. We hope to not only have created an employment opportunity by having that position here, but also to provide more direct access to the commission here. And we're hoping that this innovation will become the standard for other businesses to follow and government agencies to follow, because there is a benefit both to the agency and to the consumers, as well as the benefit of providing employment opportunities for people with disabilities. And I want to applaud our chairman and all of our colleagues who have been supportive in promoting that effort and making all of this happen. Before I go any further, I want to be sure to introduce our very impressive panelists here this morning. I'm a Yankees fan, and as I look here, I'm reminded of Murder Row up there, where we have Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, who are all remembered there, and I see that in this panel today. So it is a bit intimidating for me to moderate a panel with such giants here, but I want to thank you for your time. And you can see they have very impressive bios that are all available in your program. For the sake of time, I will I will let each of you introduce yourselves in your title, but we will start with Dr. Kojo Amisa. He is a career counselor at Gallaudet University's Career Center here in Washington, D.C. Following him, we'll hear from Brandon Cox, who is the Senior Director of Rehabilitation and Education Services, a Certified Orientation and Mobility Specialist for Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind. Next, we will have Susan Mazrui. Susan is the Director of Global Public Policy for AT&T Services. And closing us out here will be Mark Reichert, the Director of Public Policy for the American Foundation for the Blind. I'm going to allow each of our panelists to give some opening remarks. In your capacity as administrators, how has your experience in your positions related to employment for people with disabilities, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your role in promoting those opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And we'll start, I guess, to my left here with Dr. Amisa, or if you would like, or perhaps at the other end, Mark, would you rather kick us off? And again, just some brief opening remarks about your role in promoting employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Mark?
Talk about you. You want to go first?
Sure. I will go first. Actually, thank you for deferring to me, Mark. This is Dr. Kojo Amisa. I want to first thank everyone for having me here today. It is very nice to be here and talking with Greg, who has made some wonderful things happen for people like me. I have a job because of Greg's push back in 1988 at the protest there, but I'm concerned about the New York Yankees part that he shared earlier. I will talk about that. I mean, you should be a Nationals fan. We're here in D.C. We can talk about that later. I work at Gallaudet University here in Washington, D.C., and our goal is to try to raise the bar for students through our internship programs. And in fact, Brandon here has been to our school giving workshops, trainings, and presentations to our students about expectations for interns and the expectations for all students to participate in internships. And it's something for them to think about. So I would ask you to think about how you can provide opportunities for interns and how you can help those interns develop to join the workforce. That's a really important part to consider. And without an internship program, students are going to have a hard time reaching out and networking with professionals and have a hard time getting those work opportunities. So I implore everyone here today to truly, seriously consider how you can become a part of the solution. As Greg has said, over the course of the last 25 years, we have not seen the improvement that we would like to see for employment for people with disabilities. And at Gallaudet University, we're training our students in resume writing. We're training our students in interview skills, doing mock interviews. And it's nice to hear from employers. So employers who are out in the world hiring these interns, and I've been blessed to really be able to work with Brandon from time to time, and I hope that he'll share a little bit about this in his remarks as well. But again, I would ask all of us to think very seriously about coming to Gallaudet. Come visit us. If you don't want to be in a classroom to give a presentation, we can give you a tour. We can show you the campus. We can introduce you to American Sign Language. We can teach you American Sign Language if you need it. We can show you our Career Center and introduce you to our students who are looking for internships in their chosen careers. We have alumni who work here at the FCC, and I'm proud to say that. So there's proof positive that the program works. This is Greg. Thank you, Mark. And we'll move on to Kojo's left with Brandon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. My name is Brandon Cox with the Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind. CLB has been providing services in the Washington region for over 100 years. We provide comprehensive services to anyone who is visually impaired, no matter if they have some other type of disability. Today I'm here to mainly focus on talking about the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program and the great success that we've seen with it. It is also known as ICANN Connect, and it's a little easier to say, so that's what you'll hear me refer to it as from now on. We are the provider for ICANN Connect in Washington, D.C., and we partner with Perkins School for the Blind in the state of Maryland. We have been very blessed to have a great team come on board, led by Shannon Wright in our organization, to develop a training program that is really, it's providing the ICANN Connect services in the most efficient and successful way possible. We have seen an incredible amount of success from this program. The best way that I can explain this to anyone who's not from the disability arena is imagine yourself if everyone in the world was deaf and blind, could not hear or see. Would deaf blindness be a disability? It actually wouldn't, because none of the barriers would be there. The world would be set up for people who were very similar to each other. So that is really what the entire disability movement is about, is breaking down barriers. ICANN Connect has obliterated the communication barrier between the isolated deafblind community and employers and society. In the past, someone who was deafblind who did not have access to equipment could only communicate with the broader society through a tactile interpreter. This is a very restrictive way to communicate. Now today, one of my deafblind staff members, he has an iPhone and a Braille display because of this program. He texts me and sends me emails and drives me crazy sometimes with the information, because we have opened up a world of information to individuals who are deafblind. The community is thriving because of it now. They're making connections, and they are moving into the job market. The best success that we've seen is deafblind people training other deafblind people. What we are now working on and researching is how can we push these individuals into the regular employment pool. 70 to 80% of people who are visually impaired are unemployed, and the number is higher for the deaf community. And so whenever you combine deafblindness, it is really a really dramatic number to consider. We have seen a few challenges, which I'll get into a little later, but the cost of this equipment is a major issue. A Braille display alone can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $7,000. And if you're a Braille user and a tactile sign language user, that is the only way that you can communicate sometimes without an interpreter. So for smaller businesses, which are our largest employer base in the country, they are not able to pay for these reasonable accommodations for someone who is deafblind. So we've been working very hard to educate employers and find new pathways into employment for the deafblind community. Thank you.
I'm Susan Mazrui, and I work at AT&T, and I am pleased to say I'm one of many, many people who are working on disability access within our company. The reason I'm pleased to say that is I cannot think of any other field that is more important to employment these days than the information and communications technology fields. Without the ability to communicate with others, without the ability to have access to information, without the ability to share documents and to make changes and to move and do this in a mobile environment, you don't have access to jobs. And that's the bottom line. Today's field, most of your jobs are going to be using something related to communications and information. That's the bottom line. Fortunately, at AT&T, we have a dedicated staff of people who have human factors and accessibility expertise, our Corporate Accessibility Technology Office. And while this was developed in part to comply with the CVAA and our record keeping and to provide a systematic approach to accessibility for consumer markets, the reality is there's been an impact on business markets as well because there are choices. So instead of offering one or two devices that are accessible for people with disabilities, there's a range of choices. It's also enabled us to take a very strong stance when we're working with our partners. AT&T video meetings with Blue Jeans is something that's been announced recently. It is a fully accessible way for people to have video communications. And so if you're deaf, if you have a hearing loss, if you're blind, if you don't even want to deal with the visual aspects of it, you all have methods of calling in and working together and sharing information. So you can put a screen that has the captioning of what people are saying. You can pull the screen back and customize it so you can easily see sign language. And you can do it on a variety of devices in a variety of areas. So the reality is, when we work together to get to this point, and when we comply with CVAA has been a lever for us. It's been a tool that's enabled us to provide more and more access and more opportunities, not just for connecting in the home and civic participation, but having a job. And the policies, the practices, the equipment, the services we have today are more accessible as a result of requirements that have been put in place and because of innovation and creativity. You have a range of smartphones today. If you go in a room of people who are blind, you would be amazed at the number of people who use smartphones, not just to make calls, but to do research, to connect with schools, to connect with their employers, to get email, to web browse, which is also a requirement for the CVAA, and do a range of things. The opportunities provided by these technologies are phenomenal, but we still need to work together, and we need to address some challenges ahead.
Well, good morning. How are you all doing? Sounds like me, you may need a second cup of coffee. So my name is Mark Reichert. I'm the Director of Public Policy with the American Foundation for the Blind. We are really honored to have been invited to participate in this morning's panel. And if we're comparing each other to Babe Ruth, et cetera, I feel like I'm the water boy up here. So it's really flattering to be asked to be part of this. AFB has been in existence for almost 100 years, and we'd like to think we have several claims to fame, but if we certainly have one, it would be that Helen Keller worked for us for more than 4 decades of her extraordinary life. And, the thing about Helen Keller is our sort of memory of her, at least sort of the cliche memory, is the sweet, or maybe not so sweet, deaf-blind girl at the water pump. And yet we know that over the course of time, she developed into an incredibly fierce, progressive advocate for a lot of causes, not only for people with disabilities, but for humanity, really. There's no question about it. Can you imagine what a fierce spirit like Helen Keller's had would be like given an iPhone? Can you imagine, or frankly, any device like that, a refreshable Braille display, turn a woman like that loose on being able to communicate? This is a woman whose writings, quote unquote, had to be burned by Adolf Hitler. Anyone who targets someone for activism like that, if Hitler thought it was worth being paranoid about Helen Keller, that's a woman I admire, right? There's no question about it. Just imagine what someone like that today would be able to do with the technology. The truth is, you don't have to imagine it. I mean, I think of people like Haben Gorma, who is a deafblind young woman who is, I believe, almost finished with Harvard Law School. These are people that scare some of us half to death, right? Because they're brilliant, and they're the next generation of the Helen Kellers out there. We've been really pleased, among the other activities that AFB has been involved in, technology evaluation, publishing, et cetera, to stand shoulder to shoulder with the deafness and deafblindness communities, among others, to advocate laws like the CVAA. And I have to say that I think we all recognize that that law, Section 255, the other activities that are within the jurisdiction of this commission, obviously create opportunities and break down technological inaccessibility. They break down those barriers. But there's another reason why they're important, and I'll close with this story for now. 23 years ago or so, something like that, yours truly, little graduate of a law school just not too far down the road in GW, got out, lived about 2 years in my apartment like a little hermit. The only thing I ever did was go out and try to look for jobs. And one job I went out to look for, the guy says to me, "You know what, Mark, you have a great little record. It's wonderful. You seem like a nice guy. But we're not sure you can work here because we don't have any Braille phones." And I can honestly tell you that there ain't no such thing as a Braille phone. But thanks to the work that we've been doing here and that you all have been doing, I think we've been able to break down those barriers. So namely, all the work that you're doing is helping to eliminate those kinds of excuses like that. Look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Technology is not the only barrier. We also have attitudinal barriers. We have awareness barriers that I think you've managed to point out as well, which I appreciate. Last summer, I had the opportunity to speak with a deafblind attorney, deafblind attorney from Harvard, who was just mentioned, who uses some technological equipment, uses voice recognition technology and a Braille display, and using those technologies, we were able to talk for almost an hour, and at the end I asked her, I assume you got this equipment through the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program? And her response was, of course, yes. And that's one example of the strong positive impact we've seen from that program. I'm hoping that this will be a little bit of a softball question that I will lob into you here, and then we can leave some time for questions from the audience, should there be any. My first question here is fairly broad, but I hope that you can give us some interesting answers. Based on your experiences in administrative and leadership capacities, what might be the impact of the FCC's implementation of accessibility requirements for advanced communication services, particularly on employment and opportunities in the workplace for experiences for people with disabilities? Anyone willing to go first? Well, I am sitting in the first seat, so I guess I will go first here. It's Dr. Amisa. I am a hard of hearing person. And some people may be wondering what that means. What that means is that I can hear some sound. For example, I can't hear very high-pitched sounds. So if I have a high-pitched phone ringing beside me, I may sit not knowing and hearing people maybe looking at me saying, "Your phone is ringing. Why can't you hear that?" And I just simply can't hear that. So no offense to the ladies in the room, but most women's voices are beyond my capacity to hear. I can hear most male voices. Sorry, it's true. One nice thing that the FCC has contributed for me to have access is voice recognition over the phone here. I'm specifically talking about InnoCaption, which is a service over my phone. This is a phone that has the capability of using my phone number to make calls to a hearing person or to receive call from a hearing person. And when that call is initiated, I see captions of that call. And I'm able to use my own voice. And I'll actually use my voice right now if you'll excuse me. Let me make sure I've got the microphone on.
Good morning. Surprise. So InnoCaption allows me to be able to read the text on my phone and at the same time talk to my sister, for example, who is always checking up on me, making sure I'm okay and that kind of thing. It also allows me to talk to employers when I connect students with employers. So it's a really great tool to have as a hard of hearing person, as opposed to when you have an individual who can't hear at all. So then that's useless. But then FCC is being able to give us the video phone capabilities that we can use, range from Skype to Sorensen to ZVRS. Those are all great technology that we can communicate with interpreters, and not only that, but one-on-one conversations. We can call friends, whereas before, we will visit a friend without calling them ahead and just kind of knock on the door. And when I'm saying knocking on the door, I mean kicking the door, actually. Physically kicking the door, making all these kinds of noise, waking up neighbors and stuff like that. All that's been eliminated with the video phone technology. So getting back to what Gaudet offers is that when we put students on internship, not only do we place them there, but we also we offer training on how you can install a video phone to allow them to communicate with coworkers and be accessible. The key is to grab the opportunity to have that student come in and show you how they can use the technology to be productive, and show those skills and be able to be part of what Greg said, the workforce. So FCC has opened a lot of doors for deaf and hard of hearing, deaf-blind students, and Gaudet now is getting a large population of deaf-blind students. So that's why we bring Brendan to come in and talk to our students and kind of expose them to the different technology that's available to them. So FCC is opening the door for us with little things, but really, like for example, the TV, for example. Now in my house, my daughter's 8 years old, and she's not going to watch TV without the closed caption on because she can hear, and she knows that daddy can't hear. So when the closed caption is not on, she'll be like, "Daddy, where's the closed caption?" "Oh, sorry. Well, I'm the one supposed to be asking that question, but my 8-year-old is asking that question." So these are little things that FCC are doing, and I hope that it continues, in the near future to create more opportunities for deaf and blind and deaf and hard of hearing people. Thank you.
I think we're going to pause here while we get our closed captioning sorted out. We are not seeing closed captioning on the screen, so we're just going to pause briefly until we get that sorted out. Okay. It says standing by. Let's see if we get some captions running on the screen. I was just explaining to Dr. Misa, this reminds me of the Super Bowl blackout a number of years ago where we suspended play, and it looks like now we're back.
Yeah, funny you say that because I support the San Francisco 49ers, so for you to mention the Super Bowl is kind of coincident in the conversation we're having today. But, that being said, I'd like to pass it over to my colleagues here, to hear what they have to share. Thank you.
I'll just give one other example. One of our staff members who is deafblind, who was actually our first intern that we had from Kojo's program, we were training him to go out and provide training through ICANN Connect and also to teach other deafblind people Braille. And he was going out using public transportation, but he reached a point where he was very concerned about his safety. We go into all different parts of the community. And he was not able to go out on his own until he received his iPhone from the ICANN Connect program. So it's enabling people to feel more secure to go out and take risks for jobs and job development. Another area that is a larger concern that we're facing now that people have access to this information, it's important that we have web accessibility online. Most job applications are online. A very large number of them are not accessible to someone using a screen reader or a Braille display in filling out that application. So that's a major barrier that we've been focusing on, making sure that private businesses and sometimes even other government entities' websites are accessible to individuals who need to go on and apply for jobs. So it's allowing people to take risk. It's allowing them to step out of their comfort zone independently and really pursue their dreams.
My experience with AT&T and my experience as a person with a disability has really changed over the years. And I think the CVAA, Section 255, and other requirements around accessibility has been a big part of that. When I was in graduate school, I had what was basically the first access to a talking computer. And it was basically like a word processor. That was it. And that's how I did my master's field study. I don't, to this day, know how I did it. But and when I started, you used readers. You had all these accommodations that were one-offs. And this is common in the field. You had a lot of assistive technology. And some of that's still needed today. But so much more is being done through universal design, where the access is being built in. And the benefits are not just for people with disabilities, but for people without disabilities. And finally, there's efforts to actually include accessibility and expand it beyond the population that you would identify as having a disability. So we're reaching all the people who don't identify as having disability, but we really know they have them. So the employment opportunities, the access becomes much more transparent. And so if you have a small company and everyone in your company uses iPhones, you don't have to go out and buy a specialized piece of equipment in most cases. If you're in a larger company and you're trying to make your systems work together, and network systems and various different devices, the odds are, for most people, you're going to have the ability to have this and not have to have somebody who's specialized look at the technology and bring in experts out of the field and jerry-rig a solution. And so that's much more transparent, it's much more efficient, it's much more convenient. Two ways in employment, aside from the opportunities that are afforded by this technology, really come with the field of experts in accessibility and usability. And many companies now are employing people with disabilities who happen to have backgrounds in the area. I mean, who understands deafness better than a deaf person? And who understands the technology than someone who's been using it for years and has a background in computer sciences or engineering or something along those lines? So we are seeing more and more people with disabilities being employed in those positions, and we're seeing more and more people with disabilities being employed. And once you have people with disabilities in your company, in your office, it helps those without disabilities overcome their fears, overcome their reluctance to understand disability and their lack of comfort, which is really the biggest disabling condition out there. And so by enabling the technologies to make employment easier, by providing employment opportunities both in accessible technology area and in general fields, accounting, law, whatever, and by making a more inclusive workforce, we're able to really transition the work environment to be much more friendly and open and help those people without disabilities overcome their attitudinal disabilities.
Yeah, this is Mark. The only thing that I'll say, sort of building off that blind or braille phones joke, is that certainly a lot more needs to be done with respect to interconnected and non-interconnected VoIP office equipment. There are a lot of blind folks who have been employed through call centers across the country and other settings. This equipment is absolutely essential. A lot more needs to be done to make sure that equipment is accessible, and the work that the Commission has done lays the regulatory or the legal sort of framework for sort of jumping on those groups that don't make the technology accessible. But we can work and intend to work a lot more closely with employers who do get it and do understand that they want to hire people with disabilities, who can rightfully say, you know what, I've got these employees that I want to hire, and in this country we've determined that this office equipment needs to be accessible. How come you didn't provide it? And so that is yet another sort of a broader way of looking at the opportunities, I think, that the current requirements of law create.
We are running out of time, so I want to just hit on one more thing here. Would you highlight the impact of the FCC's regulations, for example, Telecommunications Relay Service, the CBAA, about opening up opportunities for people with disabilities? You've already talked about that a little bit. As Brandon mentioned earlier, particularly about websites, that the websites themselves may not be accessible. That is one example. Are there other examples that you can give us of barriers that are still in place to employment opportunities, technological challenges that we can look at making positive change and improvement and working towards a better experience for those who are using that technology? So barriers in technology and any proposed solutions that you may be aware of. This is Kojo, and I'm going to go back to signing here. Students often find that there are firewalls in place when they enter the workforce. Technical, literal firewalls. They want technological accommodations, but the company's firewall is a literal barrier for that type of access. So it's a problem of internal and external access. So our interns are going out to their job sites and requesting a video phone for access to the telephone system, and their supervisor is willing to provide that, and when they get it on site, they are scrambling to try to find a way to either have access to the video at all, to get it through the firewall, or to get it through the firewall clearly, and at some point they decide to give up. And so I think that there are a lot of security issues in play here that are causing barriers, that are causing companies to install those firewalls, which are then affecting access there. Now, I don't work at the NSA. If you don't work at the NSA, then I don't know where it's going to work. But, my students are getting in, and they're contacting the Career Center, and they're saying, my boss is inflexible. They're not willing to disconnect the firewall, and it's like, I'm not sure what the FCC can do about that, but I know that that is one recurring theme that we have heard from our student interns. Greg, thank you. Kojo, go ahead. Brandon?
I would just say working with individuals that are blind, they're not deafblind. The I Can Connect program is great for the deafblind population, but whenever it comes to working with vocational rehabilitation agencies, sometimes it's a struggle to get through the process of purchasing equipment that people might need for a job search process, and then also ensuring that they have the training on that equipment. Most of the people that we work with at the Lighthouse are adventitiously blind. They've lost their vision later in life. They've already been working. They did not grow up in school learning Braille. So that is still a tremendous barrier, whether they learn Braille or they're using auditory feedback for the information that they have.
I would say the biggest challenge that I see technologically, aside from your basic things like CAPTCHAs, have to do with the ability to share information online, to have online meetings that are effective and work effectively, to have opportunities to share documents. A lot of the technology now is going into the cloud, and so a lot of the processing is done remotely. We still don't know of great systems that provide that access across disabilities, and that's a huge challenge and a huge barrier. Think of going to a meeting with a group of people and you're the only one who can't communicate, and that's what's happening online. And with mobile and flexible workforces, that's absolutely critical. The other thing that is not technological necessarily, but has to do with the understanding of technology, is that agencies are still not selecting or implementing technology that's accessible, especially when it comes to things that are done online. They still are not asking for it. They're not, and when they have tools, they're not necessarily implementing it. They don't know it can be done. And then it puts the onus on the employee to then advocate, which is a really hard position to be in, because if you're going to your company or you're going to your agency and you're saying, this is being done wrong, you need to do A, B, and C, then you become the troublemaker, and that does not help your career opportunity. So there's technology that needs to be addressed. There are barriers in terms of security and privacy that need to be worked around or find a workaround. There needs to be a better way to share information and to do it in real time and to increase inclusion in a virtual world. And there needs to be opportunities for people with disabilities to influence it and be in a leadership role. One of my biggest fears that I have in this field is that as accessibility becomes a real field, people with disabilities are being pushed down. They're not taking the leadership or given the leadership role or recognition.
Thanks so much for the opportunity again to present today. I would just say that I'm not so sure that the biggest barrier is technological. I think it's really a matter of will, and it's really a question of determining, and each of us have to do this. It's really a matter of determining that we're going to have a zero tolerance policy for not taking both the law and just general accessibility issues seriously. I know it's an issue in this agency. It most assuredly, this agency doesn't stand alone with this challenge. Several years ago, the Department of Justice sort of documented all of this. Agencies aren't really across the board taking the 508 expectations that government's going to be using and developing accessible technology seriously. And if somebody is developing web pages, databases, whatever it happens to be, and we pick up the phone and say to them, oh, gosh, have you thought about accessibility? And the response is, yeah, it's one of the things we're considering. We need to build it first, and then we're going to talk about accessibility. But don't worry, we'll take care of your issues. Two things about that will happen. Number one, know that you've broken the law. And number two, it ain't gonna work. That's the technical legal expression for that, right? So how do you address that? It's a personal commitment that each of us have to make. It's a professional commitment. And also institutionally, it's a commitment that needs to be made. So my sort of parting shot, and this is something that our community has advocated up here many times before, as you can plainly tell based on my participation on this panel, blind people don't know when to shut up, and we talk very frequently. And so if you really want to have that kind of vocal sort of participation to be the conscience, a way to address that would be to beef up the staff of folks with disabilities, particularly folks who are blind or visually impaired or folks who come out of our community. We'd love to see more of our folks at DRO and, frankly, throughout this agency. I think when we look at the effort spearheaded by Chairman Wheeler to recognize the talents of people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities, that gives us a lot of hope that that kind of effort reaching out to specific disability groups will happen. But that's the kind of resource then that an agency can turn to build in those advocates so that, Susan, one is not that lone wolf, lone advocate who is the troublemaker, that indeed he or she has teammates and friends and frankly is in hopefully a leadership capacity within that agency.
Thank you, Mark, for rounding it out here. And I will be the one here who did not tell you to sit down and shut up. And we've brought you in. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I would like to wrap us up here. Clearly, we have tools, we have technological resources out there. It is about a person with a disability becoming a self-advocate, and some of those times that we have pointed out, making those requests, but there are also times when those requests are either denied, or it takes a little extra advocacy to make those things happening. Show the way to those employers. So rather than expecting others to do for us, because I know that we have a whole wealth of resources that are at our disposal and information out there and available, but we simply need to show the way. Obviously, our distinguished panel has all done that. I want to thank you all for your outstanding contribution, the work that you have done towards promoting employment for people with disabilities, not just getting them into the workforce, but having them promoted and advanced. I want to thank you again so much for your time. We are going to be moving into a break, I believe, for 10 minutes. We are going to have a guest who is going to be speaking. Susan, did you have something, I'm sorry, you wanted to add before we close?
Just as for clarification, when you're saying a panel of giants, you meant a panel of Giants fans, right?
Yeah. Good job.
From San Francisco.
Football or baseball language? I don't know. We're mixing our metaphors here. All right. Okay, thank you all.
If we could just, first of all, I want to thank the panel as well. And Mark, now I know why we're such good friends, because we both can't shut up. The panel was absolutely extraordinary. Thank you all for giving your time and effort to this. I think everyone here so appreciates all of your incredible words of wisdom and advice and experiences. It was fascinating to listen to all of you. If you would not mind taking about 5 minutes instead of 10 minutes, we are hopeful that one of our commissioners will be coming down shortly. So if you could just shorten the break a little bit, we'd appreciate it. Thanks. You can. I just want sit down, everybody. Thank you for taking your seats now. Thank you. Sorry for the shortness of the break. We've had a lot to cover in a short period of time today, but we appreciate everybody being here and allowing the program to proceed. Okay, Commissioner Riley, would you? We welcome Commissioner Riley to give some remarks. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
So I guess I'm known as the person who killed the break. But I was watching from upstairs, so hopefully you got a little bit of... I enjoyed watching the first panel and the chairman's remarks as well. I'm going to have a few remarks, and thank you for... I'm incredibly honored to be here today to spend a few moments discussing National Disability Employment Awareness Month. As I mentioned, I did get to watch the first panel and I really enjoyed the conversation. I especially enjoyed the conversation on firewalls because I hadn't thought about that perspective. But by way of background, prior to my current role as a commissioner, I spent my professional career working on Capitol Hill for various members of the House and the Senate. During that time, there's always been an effort to declare a new day or for a special cause. After a while, they all seemed to blend together to a point where you lost some of the significance. It always seemed that there was some particular event. Bring Your Parrot to Work Day or National Rock Collectors Week. I don't mean to make light of the overall importance of bringing attention to a particular cause, but for a handful of causes, you realize the long-standing history and prominence. In conducting research for the National Disability Employment Awareness, I learned that it originated right after World War II, when Congress declared the first week of October as National Employ the Physically Handicapped Week. In 1962, physically was removed to recognize all forms of disability. And in 1987, Congress expanded the length from a week to a month and modified the name. This is a national importance, finding employment opportunities for those individuals that may be physically or intellectually challenged. Few things in life can be as rewarding as a job. A good day's work and a job well done can provide a sense of accomplishment and improve one's spirits unlike anything else. My numbers may be a bit dated, but I understand that the employment rate for disabled Americans is approximately 2 to 3 times that of non-disabled. This is a huge untapped community that can provide valuable additions to any business. It may require a bit more work, a bit more training, or a bit more understanding, but employing those in America that may be disabled can be exceptionally beneficial. Smart businesses realize that the disabled community represents a huge purchasing power. By some accounts, it equates to a $1 trillion consumer market with individuals and families that can be extremely loyal to companies that employ disabled individuals. When the opportunity to speak at this event came to my attention, my first thought was for a very good friend of mine, a former housemate from yesteryear, with a young son born with Williams syndrome. For those unfamiliar with Williams syndrome, as I was, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder that is caused by the deletion of 26 genes at the end of chromosome 7. My friend's son will always have certain challenges in life, but he's the most outgoing and kind child I've ever met. My friend said it best. Can it really be qualified as a disability if the traits of Williams syndrome are that you're too trusting and generally always happy? As you can imagine, such qualities can be a challenge in our current environment of always on the go, get ahead of the next guy, overachieving lifestyles. It means that finding the right future paths will require extra work, and finding potential employment circumstance will be a challenge. Employing America's disabled is especially important as the great number of American heroes return from battlefields far away. As circumstances of America's recent wars have resulted in many American soldiers returning with physical or intellectual disabilities or both. Just weeks ago, a new memorial was dedicated on land just blocks from the Capitol. The American Veterans Disabled for Life Memorial reminds us of the sacrifices of war and the needs going forward. The FCC has an important part to play in improving the circumstances faced by America's disabled. Certainly, we can hire and do hire disabled Americans to fill positions in our great team. But we also have a role in ensuring that communications capabilities are available for all Americans, what can be just as important for those seeking to be employed. For me, I'm very cognizant of the decisions we make pertaining to the future of technology and consumer adoption. I'm fond at looking at the added benefit of what technology can bring to consumers. We balance the creation of unique products and services for the disabled community with seizing on the technologies that are already available. Think of the inventions like email and texting and video conferencing and advanced mobile capabilities that were talked about on panel 1 and how these technologies have changed the lives of American disabled. Think about the application marketplace and how developmentally capable it can bring services to consumers. Moreover, the decisions we make here at the FCC and elsewhere in government have an impact on the ability of businesses, especially small businesses, to make a return on capital, to make payroll at the end of the month, or to decide to employ people. That is one reason I'm especially careful to impose new burdens or obligations on American businesses elsewhere from the disabled issues. In our current economy, expanding employment and the number of jobs is so very important. In closing, I want to thank you so much for having me here. I wish you a successful panel too, and I'll be paying attention and watching from upstairs. So thank you so much and best wishes.
Thank you, Commissioner Riley, for your introductory remarks as we move into our second panel on federal employment of people with disabilities. My name is Cynthia Bryant, and if anyone looks under the table, I am joined by my service dog, Sophia, and she will hopefully not snore during our... If you hear puppy dreams, just ignore that. I wanted to take a moment to introduce our distinguished panelists. we have Michael Murray with us from the Office of Personnel Management. Michael serves as Principal Advisor to OPM's government-wide disability programs and policies. He works with senior-level officials throughout the federal government in implementing the President's initiative to increase federal employment of people with disabilities. Welcome, Michael. Thank you. Dexter Brooks joins us from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Dexter, a member of the Senior Executive Service, is Director of Federal Sector Programs within the Office of Federal Operations at the EEOC. Federal sector programs work with federal agencies to develop strategies to prevent discrimination so that people with disabilities can compete on a fair and level playing field. Welcome, Dexter. We also are joined by Jonathan Lucas and Kwaku Ajman from the ARC of the United States and from St. John's Community Services. These are two organizations, as we've already learned earlier this morning from the chairman, these are the two organizations that the FCC is partnering with in its initiative to hire people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are ready to work. Jonathan is Managing Director of Employment and Transition Services at the ARC, and Kwaku is Director of Employment for Day and Education Services in the District of Columbia at St. John's Community Services. Welcome, Jonathan and Kwaku. And finally, we are excited to have Alex Mitrochinkov. And Alex is one of our recent employees, and he has joined us through our partnership with the ARC and St. John's Community Services. Alex works in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau in the Reference Information Center, and Alex received his associate's degree in paralegal studies from Suffolk Community College in New York and his bachelor in professional communications from Farmingdale State College. Welcome, Alex. I'm going to turn to Michael to get us started on the President's initiative and perhaps federal employment trends for people with disabilities, targeted and non-targeted groups, and just expand from there.
Thank you, and thanks for the kind introduction. That is a really huge question, and so I don't know that I'm going to be able to answer all of that, but obviously I think as we go throughout the panel we can look at it a little bit more. I think I want to start, though, by yesterday for National Disability Employment Awareness Month, my Director Catherine Archuleta, the head of the Office of Personnel Management, took an opportunity to go to George Mason University, and she visits universities throughout the country and encourages people, and young people especially, to apply for federal employment. She wants to really say, hey, become a federal employee. And so we had the opportunity to meet with the Mason Life program, which has also worked with FCC along with the ARC and St. John's, to bring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities into federal service. And the thing that I got so excited about was the panel. The director moderated a panel, and there were one FCC employee and one person who's interning at the FCC. And I asked the young man who was on the panel if I could mention his story. I told him I wouldn't mention his name, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can mention my story." So when he was asked what's the hardest thing about transitioning into employment, he said, "Oh well, it was waking up in the morning and getting to work on time." And I thought, well, okay, you know. He said, "Yeah, I wake up at 4:15 every morning, so that I can take the long commute, so that 8:30 on the dot, I'm sitting at my desk." Not because his manager isn't flexible, but because he said, I'm going to be there at 8:30, 4:15 every morning. Anybody else got a commute like that? I mean, seriously, that is amazing. And I think that it's amazing for any of us, right? And I think that part of what we are learning, and what the research shows, is that including people with disabilities in any workforce is not only good for a person with a disability, but it's also good for the rest of the workforce. We see higher retention rates, lower accident rates, overall improvements in the way that people feel about the workforce. So it couldn't be more positive for all of us, and it adds to the innovation, the diversity of thought that we in the federal community need in order to better serve the American people. That's what I believe, that's what the director believes, and that's ultimately what the president has stated, that the federal government, as the nation's largest employer, must become a model for the employment of people with disabilities. And he did a few things inside of Executive Order 13548. Firstly, he said we're going to set a goal of 100,000 people with disabilities over 5 years. Right? He said that we're going to have plans that each one of the agencies are going to create with specific targets and goals on how they're going to implement those plans. And then we set someone as responsible for being accountable at each agency for implementing those plans. And so there are a number of things that need to happen in order to change a big system like the federal government. But I think we are definitely headed in the right direction. I'll give you guys a quick few statistics, and then I'll turn it over to whoever's next. So when I look at non-seasonal, full-time, permanent new hires within the federal government in 2013, and this the director released this data yesterday, and we'll be posting it online hopefully before the end of the week, but 18.18% of non-seasonal, full-time, permanent new hires in federal service were people with disabilities. There are more, that's a higher percentage of people with disabilities hired into federal service than at any time in the past 33 years. 33 years. Simply because we made a commitment and the disability community delivered. And it's true for any employer. Any employer who commits to hiring people with disabilities, the disability community will deliver. Right? Everybody agree? Y'all on board? All right, I'm excited. That's what we're talking about. Now, when it comes to people with targeted disabilities, and this is a subset of disability groups or a subset of disabilities that we focus in on to make sure that everybody gets included, we hired at 1.31% of non-seasonal, full-time, permanent new hires were people with targeted disabilities. That's not good enough. Right? Now, that is a serious improvement from before we started the executive order. But it's not good enough. And so it's an area where we've got to focus. But again, the fact that we've moved that percentage point so much higher shows that when you commit to hiring people with disabilities, the disability community is going to deliver. We got everything that you need. You need a scientist, we got it. You need an accountant, we've got it. You need a EEO specialist, we've got it. You need a Dexter Brooks, we might not have it because he's unique and exceptional, right? But we've got everything that you need. So when you commit to hiring us, we deliver in force. And then just really quick, on-board numbers for 2013, 12.8% of non-seasonal, full-time, permanent employees with disabilities in the federal government. That's a higher percentage and a higher real number of people with disabilities in federal service than at any time in the past 33 years. 33-year high. Because we committed, and the disability community, come on, people, you with me? They delivered. That's right. All right, good. And then again, when we look at targeted disabilities, we finally broke that 1% mark. We're at 1.02%. But again, it's not good enough. Targeted disabilities, we've got to focus on this more. We're seeing growth. I don't want to criticize federal employees because I know that many of you have been working on this and you're pushing towards it. The fact that we've seen the growth means that we can see more growth, right? The fact that when you make that commitment, the disability community delivers. So what we need is an even bigger commitment in this area, and the disability community will deliver. So I think that's all I've got for now. Is that good? Did that answer your question?
That answered my
Okay,
question. And I'm going to leave this next question between the two of you, maybe to segue into bringing Dexter into the conversation, because we're talking about, Dexter, you bring to the table strategies to prevent discrimination, and I know Michael as well, Schedule A is in the mix. So can we kind of segue between the two of you as Schedule A and Dexter, some of the strategies to prevent discrimination? How is the EEOC involved in all of that?
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And Michael Murray usually has more. He has the energy for both of us. So he energizes me. But
he energizes me too. Don't let him get it.
So at EEOC, we're an independent federal agency. We're commissioned like the FCC, and we have a mission to eradicate employment discrimination throughout our nation. And we have various strategies for doing that. So we have 53 field offices around the United States where if a person feels that they've been a victim of discrimination, they can come in and initiate a charge process that we have in place. And it really focuses on private, state, and local employers. So if you ever follow cases, I know you guys are following district court cases every day in your routine operations, but you'll see cases like EEOC versus Mitsubishi, EEOC versus Coca-Cola, EEOC versus Walmart, EEOC versus Walmart, EEOC versus Walmart, EEOC versus Walmart. And it's not because Walmart is the most egregious employer. It's just because Walmart is the nation's second largest employer. Because as Michael said, the nation's largest employer is the federal government. And at EEOC, with that recognition that the federal government is the largest employer, and that Congress is always intended for the federal government to be the model employer, we take a different strategy. So we don't sue the federal government. We work proactively with the federal government to try to create opportunities and prevent discrimination before we get to litigation. And so that's our role. And I work in the Office of Federal Operations, and I'm the associate director that's responsible for oversight of the federal government as an employer. And as I was talking to someone in the audience, I said, our strategy is generally this. We don't look at ourselves as strictly an oversight agency. We look at ourselves as a partner. So we're constantly learning what do we need to do as a community to achieve this illusion of model employment. And just personally, when I first came to EEOC, I came to EEOC over about 20 years ago as a attorney, and I did a lot of litigation for EEOC. And in my path, I came up as through the civil rights movement. Racial discrimination was my passion. But when you come to EEOC, you enforce various laws, not just Title VII, not just age discrimination, but also the Rehab Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I found my wisdom and knowledge in the area of disability was one of the lacking skills that I had. And so I remember when I took on an initiative to start a project, and we started a project to look at what are really the barriers of employment with people with disability. And I had to do a self-reflection because also, independent of being a civil rights attorney, working for EEOC, I'm also an SES programmatic manager, and that means I hire folks. And so I had to look at my perception of individuals with disabilities, and it came up through this lens. In every family we have folks with disabilities within your family, so you have that appreciation. But also, personally, I always felt sorry for people with disabilities, like they were not whole individuals. And with that perception, I was doing things to try to, paternalistic, not really looking at folks as they are as whole individuals. I'm looking at a person who's blind, and I imagine what would my life be like if I was blind. And I realized those perceptions are different than the perception of discrimination that folks feel because of racial discrimination. It's not this exclusion and animus. It's this belief of inability. And that's a different approach. So the approaches we took to looking at Title VII and discrimination, and is not the same approaches we can take at looking at disability discrimination. And so it's just been this evolution of trying to understand how to attack this in terms of the federal sphere. And it's been challenged. Let me say, in 20 years, we have not seen the progress we expect in terms of employment with individuals with disability. And so we push agencies. Agencies have to submit annual reports to us, and we review them, and we give them feedback, and they come up with new initiatives and things of that nature. But it's so complex that EEOC cannot do it alone. So over the last 5 years, we've really taken a concerted effort to partner with agencies throughout the federal government. We have a partnership with OPM OPM, the Office of Disability Employment Policy at Labor. We bring in other groups. I've reached out to FCC on several occasions. I think I reached out to you to help me understand the federal relay system and its intersection in the federal government with some of the things you guys do here at FCC. And it's this broad community that we have to look at together to try to figure out some of these complex equations. Schedule A is one way of doing it. It's a hiring authority to allow you to bring folks in non-competitively. It's an excellent opportunity, but we don't have enough education amongst our hiring managers of how to use it. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Just last week, we put out a new guidance on using the Schedule A hiring authority and trying to explain it. We really have to start promoting it as a vehicle, not just as a way, as a shortcut, like if you feel bad that my numbers are low, let's cheat and use Schedule A. But really think about Schedule A, because as a federal, like I said, I'm also a program manager. I look at Schedule A sometimes when I have a short hiring period, and I know, and my disability program manager at the EEOC is very good at recruiting overly qualified individuals through our Schedule A register. It's my go-to if I know I need to move quickly. And I've known when I've used Schedule A in the past, I've gotten candidates that really overachieve. And so as a strategy, we got to really start pitching Schedule A, not from that paternalistic, let's do this to help the poor people who need help, but really it's a vehicle to get extremely competent folks within your workforce. And so we got to change the messaging around a lot of things we do in this arena in the federal government.
Mm-hmm. And just really quick to hit 2 points that Dexter was looking at on Schedule A. Schedule A is a tool that we can use and should use to bring people with disabilities in, but there are also resources that exist that are utilizing Schedule A to make it stronger, right? So one of the things is the FCC's internship program. You guys are using Schedule A to bring folks in. So it's an outstanding utilization of that tool because you don't have to compete the position on USA Jobs, and you can utilize this tool to bring folks in. There's also the OPM shared list of people with disabilities has over 1,000 candidates who are Schedule A eligible, who have been pre-screened. You can go on to max.gov, click a few buttons, and get outstanding candidates right on the spot to hire instantly. You can look at their resumes, and it's an outstanding tool. There's also the Workforce Recruitment Program, which is a great program that looks at how many, or has a cadre of people with disabilities who are Schedule A eligible, and again, you can use that to bring people in non-competitively. And so and DOJ, for example, the Attorney General signed a memorandum that said for every position, you need to interview at least one person who's Schedule A eligible. You don't have to hire them, but you need to interview at least one person who's Schedule A eligible. So again, Schedule A is a tool, but how you implement that tool and how you use that tool is really what makes it the most powerful and most useful. And so setting up those policies, those procedures, those programs that allow you to use it is what makes a real difference. And then lastly, OPM just launched a mandatory online training for managers and supervisors on HR University called A Roadmap to Success, Hiring, Retaining, and Including People with Disabilities. I'd like for everybody to leave here after we get done and go take that course. It's outstanding. I'd love your feedback on it. We worked with the EEOC and Department of Labor and other folks to create it, but it gives basic information that every hiring manager needs to know, including stuff about Schedule A.
And it's interesting, Michael and Dexter, when you're mentioning Schedule A as a tool, it was an excellent tool for me as a person with a visual disability because it enabled me to bring my reader on board. To assist me with things that I need that are not readily accessible otherwise. So it has a lot of applications. I'd like to move down towards our other two guests here because it's important to see all of the hiring initiatives in action. And Jonathan and Kwaku and Alex, I'd like to bring the three of you into the conversation because we have it was a very important initiative to partner with the ARC and St. John's in hiring people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Can you talk to us, Jonathan, a bit about your organization and actually even, what the process of finding a job, preparing for an interview and getting someone ready to work that probably is already ready to work? What are some of the barriers out there?
Certainly. Thank you, Cynthia.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to start things off by just asking him, I'm the only one who's an Orioles fan, as we were I already got a few in the audience, that's good. The Arc of the United States is the largest organization serving on behalf of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So when we're talking about that 1% of target disabilities, that's what we concentrate on. And with over 670 chapters around the United States, we have a large expertise of trying to get people into the workforce, into good-paying jobs, long-term, stable employment opportunities. There's a lot of barriers throughout the process, from just even a person with IDD being able to locate a particular position using technology. Once you get through those barriers, it's being able to help the employer understand, especially in my opinion, when somebody goes in for an interview, and people are looking at candidates, it's always somewhat from a deficit perspective. This person has to sit in a room and be interviewed by a bunch of people. If they can't do the job. How does this person's resume reflect the person's skills? And if you don't have something, then you're automatically excluded. And for the people that we serve, it's very important for the employer to understand, look at things through the lens of a ability perspective. What can this person bring to the table if they're only given, one, the opportunity, but two, the environment for which they can succeed? And that can only happen through, really trying to enhance and bring out the best of that individual. So it may be as simple as having a one-to-one interview during the interview process versus a group of people so the person feels comfortable. It may be assisted technology to help that person get through the process. And really, it comes down to what we really strive ourselves in doing throughout our network is the long-term support. So once this person is onboarded, how can we make them successful in the long term? And I think what most companies, whether it's the federal government here at the FCC or otherwise, have seen is it's really people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have a lot of abilities they bring to the table, and they're committed to their jobs. And what that means is low turnover costs for employers, a chance to really teach people skill sets that they can take into the future and get promoted. And it's really about having an open mind and working toward bringing out the abilities of those people.
Kwaku, can I bring you into the conversation here as well? I know that when we also spoke at an earlier time, it's also the involvement of the family, the employer. Can you talk to us a little bit about your organization? And it almost takes a village to get the job done sometimes. The rooting, the family behind it.
It's still morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My organization the name of my organization is St. John's Community Services. We've been providing supports to persons with disabilities for over 100 years. Our organization provides supports to persons in 5 states, the District of Columbia, Virginia, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and recently Delaware. Our organization's claim to fame was that about 20, 30 years ago, after our organization had a huge fundraising campaign for a building, we had a school program, we had this fundraising campaign. Shortly after that, we realized that we needed to close the building down and provide all of the supports in the community. So at that time, that was something unheard of, providing supports to persons with disabilities in the community. And what we realized is that people with disabilities and people without disabilities learn the best from each other in natural settings in the community. And that process led to, a couple of years ago, us taking on an initiative to move to an employment first model. And that really means that all of the supports we provide, when we're planning to provide supports, employment should be the preferred option, and that should be the preferred service, and making sure that supports build on those tenets. So in my role, I'm the person you could blame if that doesn't happen in anybody who we support in our day, school, or educational settings. And in regards to a team approach, we realize that's the best way to support a job seeker. and that it takes having a team approach to help persons realize what their strengths are and what their family also what their strengths are. So when we first meet with a job seeker, we don't read any paperwork. We just meet with the person and help them explain what their skills and strengths are. A lot of times we spend too much time, in my personal opinion, trying to label what a person's disability is. What's your disability? But not really talk about how does that impact you at work. I'll share a funny story. I knew I was going to be on the second panel at 11:15, but I got here 2 hours early, and everybody reminded me that I need to be early because if I'm not early, that impacts my work performance. So that's my workplace accommodation, arriving early. So Thomas and Mindy came down like, you do know you're about 2.5 hours early for today. I do know that. And I kept on getting texts all throughout until about an hour ago. Are you on time? Are you early? You know what your disability is. You know how that impacts you and how you get nervous. So helping people understand how a job seeker's disability impacts work, and then working from that and building strengths and learning what those persons' work skills are and the things that they like to do, and then working with employers to match that. So when you have that conversation, it becomes an easier match. And Alex right next to me is a great example, and his family's here is another great example of, we realize some of the bigger barriers is not the job, it's us and how we support the job seeker in getting employed. And we'll talk about other things, but Alex is the best example of that work.
And Alex, I do want to bring you into the conversation. We spoke yesterday, and we were talking about in your resume, which is in the program, which is something that would be great for people to refer to. Everyone's resumes here. But Alex, when we were speaking, and you were talking about in your resume about the job search, and I asked you, for yourself, who brought you to the Ark in St. John's? I know you were having some difficulty in your job search, and who was very influential in bringing you to these two organizations?
Well, the family always helps, and my mom really helped me through the job process. Yes.
And I know that when you came to the FCC again, how's it going? Is it?
Yeah, it's gone really. It's gone well. I have great coworkers. Yeah, Lisa, they're all here. Lisa, Juliana, Melissa, and Debbie.
And I
work with team too. But yeah, I had some rough patches, but yeah, with the help of my coworkers and Melissa, I got through rough patches. So I think it's gone well.
And I know, Alex, or you had also mentioned one of your greatest fans that comes to visit you occasionally. Who would that be?
My job coach is here too.
Mm-hmm.
He came. He's a great support.
Mm-hmm.
He came every day to help me, and we have a candidate, like another person from David. But yeah, my job coach came every day. And he even postponed his vacation to support our work.
And that's been an excellent
trip. And he's here today. He's in front row. Yeah, and he's Alan. His name.
And that's been an excellent transition in the workplace to have him with you. And I think you also get a special visit pretty often from the chairman, from what I understand.
Yeah, he came. Yeah, I would like to thank Chairman Wheeler with the support for the support of the program. He came to our office 3 times just to see how the program is.
We could all be so lucky. And Kawaku, Alex mentions another interesting aspect there too, and Jonathan, about a coach that can come with an individual as well. To help in that transition. There seems to be a lot of assistance to make it all successful. Would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest keys is having the support of a job coach. You can come in and kind of act as a quasi-HR function and be there to go through the process of what the job's going to entail. And I know, my hat's off to Mindy and Thomas, a shining example of how an organization can adapt and make a person successful through the support of a job coach, and also informal supports like co-workers, managers, HR departments, things of that nature. And when you bring all those folks together, it really lets the person in the job shine.
Kwaku, anything to add there?
I think it goes back to just having a good job match. Alex is not telling everyone about a lot of his experience. And prior to coming to the FCC, he had some work experiences at the Library of Congress. So when we were discussing what job openings would be available, we were talking, and they said, we have a resource information center. And I said, wow, I think I have a candidate who could work in the Resource Information Center, being that he worked in the Library of Congress. And that helped with the transition. And also having Alex went through meeting with a couple of different job coaches and interviewing them to see who would be the best person to work with him. And understanding that the role of the job coach is not to supplant anything that wouldn't happen normally, but just help the person learn how to do the task to perform to the standards that need to happen in regards to that job function and that job role. So Mr. Allen's role is it to do Alex's work or anybody else he supports is just to help them understand what the information is and how to best do it, and then also to follow up and be a resource to the business. So our job is we have two persons we need to always think about. That's Alex always, of course, and also the business and the FCC. And Alex's role is to support his supervisors and also help bridge that gap so that Alex is then able to meet and, talk baseball, talk anything else with some of his other colleagues, and that it's just a natural experience. But what really helps is that the person could do the job. If you could do the job, people will like you. and that makes it a lot easier if you could do the job. Mm-hmm. So, and then having a job coach and, having training in regards to how do you support a person, and never sell a conversation. We never sell a conversation that you're going to get a 2-for-1. We never sell that. What we do sell is that we'll have somebody help them to make sure that they're prepared and they're ready to do the job. And I remember when we were going back with Thomas and Mindy about the paperwork, and they said it usually takes about 3-4 hours. I was like, oh, maybe you might be exaggerating, until I saw what needs to happen. I was like, there might be a better way to do this, I said, I couldn't do this in 4 hours. I would need, some additional support to get this done. And matter of fact, I had to call Alex and his family, like, I can't get this done. You need to help me with this also. But just having understanding what are the things that we could do to prepare so that when we start orientation, we're ready just like anyone else would be ready. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, I want to circle back around to you because that kind of gives me a thought in terms of federal agencies in general, things that can be done to make the transition for someone to coming in the agency, a little easier or easier for everyone for that matter, in terms of paperwork, even in terms of applying for the job online. Is there anything any thoughts from OPM and what you're doing with respect to all of that?
Sure, and I think Dexter might also have some great ideas too. I'm sure he has great ideas. He always has great ideas. So what we know to be a fact is when you make a system and environment that is open and welcoming to people with disabilities, it ends up being open and welcoming to everybody else. So when we're working right now on making job descriptions in simple language where anyone and everyone can understand them. And so that's going to be good for those of us with disabilities, right? But that's going to be good for everybody else too, because I know that all the rest of us, when we read that job description, we had to sit down and say, okay, what is this in federal speak, right? And so being able to take that language, also making USA Jobs easier to navigate, easier to use. A lot of the programs that we've talked about around Schedule A and publicizing that and getting folks to use it more. is some of the ways that we're working to make the process a little bit easier. But then on the onboarding side, one of the things that's vital that represents whether or not an organization is really an open and welcoming environment is whether people with disabilities are willing to self-disclose on the disability disclosure form. It's called SF-256, Self-Identification of Disability. And it's true, sometimes folks don't want to disclose because they're not ready. They may not feel that they know the business well enough to disclose. But once a business, an agency, an employer creates that open and welcoming environment where people feel comfortable disclosing, it will help with the statistics. But even more importantly, it means that person really believes that by disclosing, there's not going to be negative repercussions. And so it's actually a good gauge for you as a business, how many folks are willing to disclose. And so during the onboarding process, explaining that, having opportunities to make sure that folks understand that, also making sure that reasonable accommodations are provided in a timely manner. And I think Dexter will be better to talk about that piece.
So I would just say generally in terms of looking at the federal government as a cohesive unit, I think what you'll find across the board as a major barrier is that we advertise to ourselves. So sometimes when we pull up statistics, like Michael and I will grab statistics and we'll say how many new hires that we have in the federal government. And what we call a new hire is really not a new hire. It's over 50% of the time it's someone leaving FCC going to FTC or going from EEOC to this place. And all you're doing is recycling the pool. We're not bringing in folks from the outside because we speak a unique language in the federal government and we advertise in that language. And so folks outside of that culture don't understand it. So if I come to FTC and I walk your halls for 3 or 4 minutes, I'll get lost because you'll start speaking in code. Everybody has these acronyms and all these things that mean something to them day to day that all of a sudden becomes embedded in everything we do, all the way down to recruitment, all the way when we do job advertisements and we use certain words. So when how do you say it first? When Kwaku is trying to help an applicant, he's trying to put in words. He's putting in valid terms, but it's not the term that EEOC recognizes. But it's the same skill set, and we don't have this genericness to our language, which is is continuing to become a barrier and continue to keep folks out. And so that's something we're trying to work on holistically throughout the federal government to cure. And like Michael says, a lot of things that we've learned in the disability arena, once we do it, it helps everyone. I mean, from the time, from access to buildings, curb cuts, from things like restroom accessibility, everything is just text messaging. All these things is funny because when we really take the opportunity to really open doors when we think of this just for individuals with disability, we're making the world better. And so that's one of the major challenges I think we have across the federal government is really looking at how we advertise ourselves and how do we make sure everyone has equal access to information in the federal government. Yeah. And reasonable accommodation continues to be an issue. One of the things that we're doing at EEOC, and we're doing it with our partner organizations, this year we're going to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking, and we're going to put out new regulations to the federal government. The federal government should be the model employer, so we're going to have, for the first time, we're going to create model employer regulations. So what are the things that EEOC expects the federal agencies to do to reach this model status? And accommodation is going to be a big issue in terms of centralized funding. Managers who see an individual with a disability, whether it's for an interview or if they see it on paper, every possible negative implication around that individual is associated with that person. Like, it's going to cost money, it's going to be a problem for this person to communicate and all these things. So we have to find ways to take that cost out of the equation, how to get better awareness education throughout our ranks so people understand everyone is an individual. Even individuals with disabilities are not the same. Like, I think that's what you said there earlier. And then we really need to work on that because those are the things that's going to have the greater impact on the numbers and the opportunities within the federal government over the next decade.
And that's something that I'm sure people in the disability community are going to be watching for because that's an excellent move. I want to make sure to bring in Jonathan and Kwaku one last time. We're nearing the end, and Alex for any final comments on your organization, community efforts, those types of issues. Jonathan or Kwaku?
Okay. I think one of the major efforts that I think that is underway and it will help job seekers is helping them, learn how to develop a script to explain and talk to other on interviews and to share with each other in regards to not what their disability is, not what the label of the disability is, but helping people, job seekers, prepare to be able to share in a respectful manner what are the ways they best learn and what are the things that can best support them and what their skills and strengths are and what has worked in the past. I also think that opening up internships and work-based experiences for persons with disabilities would help bridge the gap between employers and co-workers and persons with disabilities and the people that support job seekers with disabilities, because that would allow job seekers to really learn on the job and get some experience on the job and make that a little bit more seamless. So when a position does open up, you automatically go into your mental Rolodex and say, you know what? Alex worked here. He did a really, really good job in the summer. Maybe we should bring him back for the holiday, or we should bring him back when this position opens up. So you automatically have in your mind qualified candidates. And I think that that's the thing that I would sell, is that the candidates could do the job. They have the skills to do the job. And that maybe posting job vacancies how you normally post them in locations where you normally post them might not be the best avenue. Maybe posting them in locations that are visited by persons with disabilities or persons that support them, so you have wider selection in regards to applicants, and maybe partnering. I think we're in this together, organizations, and what we did with the FCC, partnering with providers, partnering with families, with other national organizations to say, hey, this is the kind of work that we do here, and we're looking for candidates that have these skills. And I think that would lead to a better selection process, and a process where at any time that you would know that you could call on having qualified candidates. And every person is different, and they could do the job, and we just need that chance and support. Thank you.
John?
I'd like to second that. I think one of the things the ARC is doing on a national level is partnering with Career Builder to create a web portal where folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities will be matched up with employers and job availability. And I think it is going back to finding other resources and other ways to reach the talent pool besides the normal distribution. As well is Dexter hit a couple of things on the head. It even goes back to for a person how to write a resume, because a federal resume is a lot different than a resume for a private industry. And each job, a resume needs to be tailored to that particular opening. And I think having understanding and support to do that just brings a greater opportunity for people with disabilities to enter the workforce. And again, it's looking at persons' abilities and not their disabilities. And the fact that there's stories I could sit here all day and talk to you about how a person came in, and it's not just the skill strengths they bring to the table, but it's also looking at how they change the culture of a workplace. And it ends up being better for everyone, not just in how the agency changes their rules and regulations and their processes, but also how the people are uplifted by seeing people coming in and working hard, happy to have this job, and the gratefulness that transmits through the whole company. And it's a good thing what the FCC is doing here. They're giving a chance to highlight something that's going to make us all beneficial down the road.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The common thread through everyone at this panel and at the previous panel is what we're already saying, is you put the person first before the disability. So, for myself, it's Cynthia Bryan. I'm attorney. And I happen to be blind. And Alex, when I looked at your resume, and at the very end, it's impressive. You've worked at the Library of Congress. You have your paralegal associate's degree and your professional communications. All of those come before anything else. Would you agree?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You are who you are.
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for support. It comes from individuals too. I would really like to thank my mom for support. Yeah,
When
my
I-
girlfriend is scared too. My coworkers. Yeah, well, who came. I would like to thank Vicky for orientation. She helped me with orientation. And in conclusion, I would like to quote one of my coworkers who has an autistic son who is a freshman in high school. Yeah, she says that this program gives her hope for her son. Yeah, and I would like to thank Cynthia too for moderating the panel. and Thomas Wyatt. Yeah, okay.
Well, I think Alice has given the final word, so we'll close it there and join us for refreshments. Thank you, everybody.